This week I got to talk with C.I Jerez, who is the author of At the Island's Edge, which is a very empowering and emotional story about a single mom who has just left the army. When Sergeant Lina LaSalle returns to her parents' home in Puerto Rico, she faces a different kind of creating a brighter future for her young son, Teo, while making peace with her past. Teo thrives in his new life on the island, and Lina finds kinship too, with a cousin whose dreams are also shattered by the war, and with a handsome veteran who runs the neighborhood bar and offers understanding without judgment. But even in paradise, old wounds linger, as Lina wrestles with her guilt over the harrowing choices she made in Iraq, and the temptation to numb her pain. Long-buried secrets threaten to erode the very stability she's fighting for. Hope lies on the horizon, but can she keep her gaze steady? It has this looming suspense underneath it, but it's a really, really, really good fiction as well about family dynamics, the effects of PTSD, the difficulty of being a single mother who also has had experience in the army. It has a lot of elements going for it, and it was so fun getting to talk with C.I Jerez about it. So let's hear from her. I am so excited to talk about At the Island's Edge, but I did want to get to know a little bit about you before we dive into the book itself. So did you always want to write a book? What was the moment when you decided you wanted to write a book? How did that all happen for you?
Oh, goodness. So I have been an avid reader since I was 6 years old. And I was really fortunate that my grandfather lived in Manhattan, and he and his wife would always send me books. So I grew up on the Mexican border in El Paso, Texas, and there were not a lot of programs to support literacy for children in my
Mm.
neighborhood and at that time. And so these books arriving in the mail were like respite for me. And they
Mm.
introduced me to all of these beautiful worlds, and I just became obsessed. So I remember being very little and insisting that my mom put a bookshelf in my room, and I just began to collect. And so I think I was maybe 8 or 9 years old before I was telling anybody who would listen that I was going to grow up one day to be a writer.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. It is that's something I definitely talk about on here a lot. The way you can there's just so many things you can do with books, but the way you can escape into them, understand the world, all of that. I feel you on that one so much.
Yeah.
Um, how has your writing process developed? So do you outline? Do you go with the vibes? How does that work for you?
Yeah, it's funny. It's an ongoing process. I think I'm still trying to figure it out, and I have written 5 manuscripts so far. So I would say the
Wow.
one that got published at the Island's Edge, which was my third attempt, was very much a pantser process. I woke up
Mm.
one morning with this idea about, Lena's journey on the battlefield and what that would be like. And just with that idea, and knowing that she would be going home to Puerto Rico for respite, I sat down to write
Mm.
the story. And so I really had no idea where it was going to go, who the characters were. All of that unfolded organically as I was
Mm-hmm.
writing. So then,
Wow.
when I went to write the next manuscript, taking the advice of many instructors, I outlined this whole thing. I had gone through an outlining course, and so I spent a lot of time and energy in outlining my plot. And then, as I began writing, I didn't really incorporate anything that I had outlined. So I thought, okay, well, that didn't really work well for me. So then on the
Yeah.
next manuscript, the fifth, I tried a synopsis. So I had a full 3 page synopsis of
Mm.
what this book was about. And I thought, well, maybe with that much effort in a synopsis, I will stick with it. And what I
Yeah.
found is I ended up taking out the first 50 pages of the novel. It didn't start where I wanted to. So I think for me, it's really important to go organically and on pure instinct with a strong idea in my head. That
Yeah.
seems to be the works best.
Yeah. Yeah, this at the island's edge is really, it's really emotional too, and the characters feel so real, like they feel very lived in, and just all of her family as well. So I can kind of, I feel like sometimes it makes sense that you're kind of like following, maybe following the characters even like as you're writing them in more emotional stories. Is that maybe kind of how it works for you?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think, stepping away from the structure, and it's funny because on the professional side, when I'm not writing, I work in very structured industries, and that is, my go to. But when it comes to the writing, I really feel like I have to step back from what I
Hmm.
think I want and just let that story unfold and let the characters come to me as they are without any of my own predispositions in mind for who they are. And it's true, I think that works best.
Yeah. That's cool. How has your experience? I know you were in the army as well as the main character that we'll talk about a little bit too. How how did that experience inform writing this book?
Yeah, it's funny. I've always been very thankful for the army for, changing my life in all the best ways.
Mhm.
But Lena's experience, my protagonist, is very different from any of mine. And so she's
Mhm.
enlisted, I was an officer. She's a combat medic. I was in IT and then in finance. So very, very different day to day experiences and backgrounds as soldiers. I think what it
Mhm.
did inform was that I was a mother when I joined the army. I had two young
Mm.
daughters at the time, and then I had a third daughter while I was in service. Lena
Mm.
has a son. She's a single mother. I was not a single mother. And so, but I do understand what it is to put on the uniform and understand the implications, especially in wartime,
Mhm.
and what that means as a mother. And so that was very intimate for me. And then in terms of like the logistics and the lingo and the convoys and all the technical stuff about being a soldier, that was natural for me because I, lived
Yeah.
for 9 years. So
Yeah. Totally. So you kind of said that when you were writing this one, you sat down and you kind of had the feeling of like Lena on the battlefield. Was that the main point of inspiration for this book, or was there something else that was like, this is the story I'm going to tell?
yeah, I really wanted to explore at the heart of this. What was most important to me is to write a story to share a woman's perspective in a
Mm.
military environment, or for like the women that serve in the fire department or the police, police units. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like we have spent enough art and time exploring a very unique journey, which is women in uniform, in combat,
Yeah.
on the front lines. Like they are at the head of this thing. And yet we have all these movies about the men coming home from war and the men's experiences, and ours are very different. And so at the heart of this, I wanted to show, look, in the military, 20% of the military are female, and many of them are experiencing combat right up close and up front. And this could be
Mm-hmm.
what is, especially when they're mothers. And I don't think really anybody has explored what it's like for these women that are also coming home and taking on that another big job, raising their families.
Yes. Yeah. It's a huge job to have on top
Yeah,
of a huge job as well,
right,
basically.
right.
Um, and you do explore she has PTSD from her experiences, and so a large portion of her story arc is like, how is she going to choose to deal with this? Um so how did you approach that, and what what do you think kind of it I think it kind of fits in thrillers or like books like that kind of well too, because we're also kind of used to like flashbacks and going back into the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, what kind of drew you to that?
Yeah, so I think in that regard, Lena's experience is very universal. Given that I served in wartime and I was an officer, so I was leading soldiers. So understanding their experiences and talking with them, men and women alike coming back from the battlefield are oftentimes in denial. That is the first reaction, right? Is I'm fine.
Mhm.
Especially in an environment like the US Army where you are taught mental toughness, and that is really, programmed very early on, is intestinal fortitude, mental toughness, shake it off and drive on, like these, which are very necessary when you're entering into these environments. You need that mental toughness,
Right.
right? But then coming back and recovering from what you've seen and those experiences and really processing what was happening out there. Sometimes that kind of ingrained thought process gets in the way.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
really wanted, and I think this is why a lot of male readers have had such favorable experiences reading my book, because they relate to
Mhm.
what Lena's going through in that sense of denial. And for Lena, she's got this priority of raising her son. And so for her, her own issues and her own pain has to take a back seat to priority number one, which is, being a mom.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Um with her son, he's so sweet. I loved him so much.
Teo,
Um
yeah.
or
He's one of
love, I
my
guess I
favorites
actively
too.
do. Yeah. So he's dealing with Tourette's and the way that disrupts his life just as himself, but also the way like the kids at school treat him. And so but he's so sweet. So how did you kind of craft his character?
So it's funny because my idea originally started with Teo. I had been
Mhm.
reading Robert Dugoni's The Extraordinary Life of Sam Howell. I finished that book and I fell in love with Sam. And I said, I've got to write a story with a little boy. Like, I just felt very inspired by that. And
Oh, that's
then
cool.
Teo one day in my head said, I want to tell you the story about my mom. And then Lena's,
Aw.
kind of idea popped in my mind. And I explored it through that. But Teo had tics in my mind, and I couldn't figure out what or why. I'm not familiar with Tourette's as a mother. None of my children, were diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. So I began, with Dr. Google and researching,
Yes.
what would drive tics in a child. And then as I began to study Tourette's, I started to go on YouTube and watch videos of like kids that are being interviewed with Tourette's, and their experiences and those interviews really helped me bring Teo's condition to life in
Mm.
his character. I already had a very
Yeah.
clear sense of who he was with his Buddy Holly glasses and his love of science. Like, I already knew those aspects. But then the research on Tourette's helped me finalize that cohesive picture of who he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so it's kind of told non-linearly as well. And with stuff like that, I always wonder, did you write her past first, or did you write mostly in the order that the book is in?
Yeah, I wrote absolutely 100% the order that the book is in. And
Yeah.
even the twists that materialize happened very
Hmm.
organically in that moment, that I was like, oh my gosh, of course.
Wow.
How did I not see this? Right. And so I had
Yeah.
not intended for those twists as I was going that way. But when I got to the scene, the characters
Hmm.
were revealing those twists to me. And I thought, thank God for you guys, because
That's
I
so
had no
cool.
idea.
That is so cool. I think that's like so magical that people can write that way and like still surprise themselves as well.
Yes.
Like it's just so cool that it can work out that way. Um so Lena's returning to Puerto Rico for kind of like you mentioned at the beginning for a respite is what she's wanting. That's not exactly what happens overall, but it the setting feels like a character in this book,
Yeah.
and I love those. I feel like it's so immersive when you're just so aware of where you are the whole time. So how did you kind of craft that? And yeah, that's mainly the question.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that part of this book, and really proud that it made it out into the world, because I fell in love with Puerto Rico the first time I went to live there. I was almost 30 years old. It was, a while back. And I've lived there twice since, or worked there. The third time I was kind of
Yeah.
back and forth. But the island just blew me away with so many different facets of what it's about, and who it is. And it's funny because it did come out like a character. So when I was writing about her journey home, it's funny because for Lena, initially, this is like her last straw. It's the last thing she wants to do, is go back to Puerto Rico after 12 years away, where she feels like the island sent her away to go do these big, wonderful things. And now she's going back with her tail between her legs, broken, and with her son, single mom. And so this is like the worst idea in the world for her, but she really feels she has no choice. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
as I walked through my mind of what it felt like to be on that island when I lived there, it came to life for me on the page. And I would put music on, songs that were really popular when I was living there, and it just brought me back to that moment. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are those details of the island, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's the foliage, the smells, the food, the sound, the people, that
Yeah.
it came to life really easy for me because I lived it in so many
Yeah.
regards.
That's cool. I saw in one of the reviews someone even like recognized the location from the cover,
Yeah.
and I was like, that's like obviously it wasn't something that I noticed, but I saw it in the review and I was like, that is so cool when you like even recognize something like that on a book cover too.
Yeah, I showed the cover. So one that was all the publisher. I give them all the credit. They designed,
Mm.
Lake Union designed a beautiful cover, and them choosing La Garita, which is the cultural symbol of Puerto Rico, as the cover was, I mean, just so heartwarming. But the very first
Yeah.
person that I showed that cover to is from Puerto Rico, and he's got a business there. He lives there. He's a dear friend of mine. And we were on like a Zoom call, and I said, "Let me show you the cover of the book." And his eyes got teary, and was just like speechless, staring at this cover. And he said, "That's La Garita." And I said, "I know."
Oh,
And it
oh,
just, like, watching him, I thought, oh my gosh, I am even more excited that this is happening.
yeah, that's amazing. Um, so her family life is there's some complicated dynamics going on there as well, which I think is what made it the whole story feel very real too. Because their relationships are very lived in. I may have said that earlier, but um did those family dynamics, was that also something that kind of came to you just as you were writing the characters?
Yeah, so my family is very different from Lena's family. My dad is from Cuba, and my mother is
Mm.
a New Yorker, and she's half Irish, half Puerto Rican. So I couldn't
Wow.
just pull from my own experiences, because Lena's family is very different. They are all from
Yeah.
Puerto Rico. So I had to really lean on the experiences with the families that I got to know while I was on the island, in terms of how they would approach things culturally, and like the
Mm-hmm.
language. And I had some very dear friends that I was able to phone a friend and say, give me some good expressions that you use, things of that nature.
Yeah.
In terms of like the emotional complexities of family,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a really rich subject that you can draw on from any culture, right? Any
Yeah.
of your experiences. There's just, I think
Yeah.
that's pretty universal.
Yeah. That's cool that you got to like even get like the phrases that are, because there is some Spanish throughout it as well. So that's cool that you're able to kind of talk to them about like how they actually would be talking about things.
Yeah. Yeah, but
That's
I
awesome.
was very intentional to make sure that you didn't need a dictionary with the Spanish
Yeah.
in the book, that the context clues were very strong. I didn't want to have to translate every word. That's never fun, right? That
Hmm.
totally pulls you out of the
No.
story. So I used a lot of context clues, and then I was very deliberate about when and
Hmm.
where I used Spanish to honor the culture but not confuse the reader. because it is
Yeah.
primarily American reader.
Right. Yeah. It was, I listened to this one, it was a while ago, but then a couple weeks later, I listened to Salt Bones by Jennifer Javon. And
Yes.
I like it was cool how she intertwined the Spanish as well. Because it's just like, it's another, I think it's probably another immersive thing, even though, like you're saying, like we're mostly English readers here, but
Yeah.
it does kind of immerse you in it just a little bit more.
Sure. I
Um,
need to check that
and
book out. I've heard so many wonderful things about it. So you just reminded me.
it is so good, and it's like there's like folklore going on. It's in like that the Borderlands area as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so good, especially for like going into spooky season too. So like
Oh,
the folklore horror is like whoa. And you get like multi-generational stuff, which is always really fascinating to me too.
yes. Me
It's
too.
similar here. Yeah. Um, but then we do have a little romance. I was about to call it a subplot, but maybe it's not even a subplot. Like it's like it is the plot too. But he kind of is a foil to Lena and kind of softens her out a little bit.
Yeah.
So was that intentional, or did you just kind of meet him and you were like, this is who he's gonna be, like this is who Lena needs? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
I totally built an author crush on Elijah Montgomery as I was writing him. I was like hot for teacher. But he was no, he was a lot of fun. So it's funny because his disability comes from one of the soldiers that I served with when I was going to school at OBC, the Officer Basic Course in the Army, had the same disability. And I had such respect and admiration for all the things that he was able to overcome despite, his challenges. And so as
Hmm.
I was putting Eli kind of in my head and into the world on paper, I thought about all just those little minute details that I would admire watching this other soldier just in his day to day. And I thought, I really want to capture that in that Eli is very much whole and so incredibly strong inside and outside. And
Hmm.
and the other thing that was really important to me about him, one is he's, a Southern gentleman from Charleston, South Carolina. So he gives an insight for the American reader who's never been to Puerto Rico or who's not familiar with the Puerto Rican culture. They get to
Hmm.
experience Lena and her family in the island through his eyes and relate through his experiences. And so that was really important to me because that's the world that I live in as a Latina. I'm around so many different cultures.
Hmm.
And I also wanted to show the many different faces of PTSD. So,
Yeah.
although Eli is softer and stronger in some ways, he is
Hmm.
enduring his own battles. And so, PTSD
Right.
doesn't look like just one thing, it's got a lot of different
Hmm.
evolutions. And he was very instrumental in helping me show that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we do all react to things so differently, like based on even just, well, I guess that's like also the nature versus nurture, but it's like you have your temperament and then you have your experiences, and like then that shapes how you process it. Um, so yeah, I think it is good to remember that it presents in different ways.
Yeah.
With Lena, she does lean on alcohol as a way to deal with it,
Yeah.
um, which obviously is understandable for what she's gone through.
Yeah.
But how did you approach writing about that part of her story?
Yeah. So there was a few things that were very intentional for me, which one was that she had not been a drinker beforehand. So a lot of
Hmm.
people assume, oh, the Latino culture, that's, part of who they are. That's what they grow up drinking rum when they're 8 years old, which is not true, by the way. But, some people think
Hmm.
that. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to be very intentional about highlighting that. Lena was a character and a young woman who did not drink. And
Hmm.
that was not part of her lifestyle. And coming back from Iraq and meeting a fellow soldier at a bar opens up this world for her where she realizes that alcohol has the ability to numb her memories and numb her pain. And
Hmm.
it becomes very easy for her to say, if I don't drink to the point that I can't care for my son at all, like I'm incoherent or I'm passed out, if I don't reach that point, then I don't have a problem, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
all I'm doing is kind of self medicating and numbing my experiences so that I can then take care of my child.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very relatable state of mind that a lot of people will lie to themselves. And
Yes.
so it's very easy for her to take that from, I'm fine, I don't have an issue, to all of a sudden I have a pretty big issue.
There's obviously there's like highly functioning alcoholism, just like there's highly functioning depression, all of that.
Yeah.
And I felt like it kind of also played into what you were talking about earlier, where like if your job has trained you to like uh tough it out and just move on, move forward, whatever, it's
Yeah.
probably easier to come to the conclusion of like, if I'm still functioning, like I'm technically fine.
Right.
Which is,
Right.
I think we all have very different versions of that sometimes, and it's like, no, actually maybe you're hurting right now.
Right. Right. And especially
Yeah.
like in her case, she's very much an overachiever.
Hmm.
And so it's really hard for these kind of type A overachiever types, not that I would know or anything, but to admit that, they are hurting.
Hmm.
And I really wanted to walk that storyline and
Hmm.
show readers, Lena's very unique. Not a lot of women join the military, much
Hmm.
less as a single mom. Like there's not a lot of women that represent who she represents. And
Right.
yet she does fail. She does falter at times. But her
Hmm.
heart is always in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, you do feel that. Like uh you're not like angry at her, even in the moments where you're just like a little bit frustrated, like you really do understand why she's coping the way she's coping, is kind of what I'm trying to say. um so yeah, I loved it. I loved how emotional it was, or like how emotionally invested I got. So everyone needs to go read this one or listen. I really did enjoy listening to it.
Oh, yeah. So
um
the
I
narrator,
do.
I cannot highlight enough. She is so good. Her
Yes.
voice, when I listened to her read, I mean, one, she just had Lena's voice. I don't know how that happened.
Mm,
It was a little bit more magic, but um, I heard
yeah.
Lena, and when I heard Kyla Garcia narrator, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the same voice. She's a Broadway actress, she's a poet, and she
Nice.
just knew the intonation in moments that I was like, how is this possible? How could she know this?
That's so cool. Yeah, uh I love finding, like, it's so fascinating the way voices can like bring the story to life so much too. um and then sometimes you just love someone's voice. Like there are books now that I may try out just because I love the narrator, and I'm like, I probably wouldn't have even like looked at this genre maybe, but like having someone read it to you does just make it differently real sometimes. So
Yeah,
I do recommend doing that with this one. I think it did I see it was maybe Kindle Unlimited too? I can't
it was.
remember.
Yes, it has
It
been
was,
since
yeah.
it launched. So it's on
Okay.
Kindle Limited, and they're also running a $1.99 sale for, if you're
Oh,
not on
nice.
Kindle Limited, for the entire month of October. And it's
Oh,
Hispanic Heritage Month, so
perfect.
it's good timing.
Yes. Yeah. I do always ask at the end, especially since you said you're a big reader, have you read anything recently that you've loved?
Oh yes. So it's funny actually that I'm at the Women's Fiction Writer Association conference this week, and I'm reading Raquel Levitt's The Seer.
Okay.
It's very atmospheric, great for spooky season.
Mm,
So I'm about a third of the way into it and loving it. And
yeah.
then the inheritance of Orquídea Divina as a Latinx read has been really, really beautiful as well, and has been one of the books that I'm like tucking away as I remember this year. And
Yeah.
of course on the military side, Robert Dugoni's Hold Strong. We
Mm.
actually pubbed on the same day this year on March 18th. That has to
Oh,
be
that's
one of the
cool.
top 5 books I've ever read. And it's about the
Wow.
Baton Death March and his character, Sam, who is
Hmm.
going through his experiences as a POW during the,
Oh, wow.
right after Pearl Harbor, captured during the Baton Death March. And
Mhm.
my gosh, like, talk about an emotional book, but probably one of the best I've read,
Wow.
like top 5 ever.
That's amazing. That's so, and you kind of, am I remembering correctly from Thriller Fest, you kind of worked with him a little bit, or did he
Yeah,
just blurb it?
I
I can't
call
remember.
him
Like,
my,
that's so cool that
yeah.
you're inspired by his book.
So it's funny. He's my mentor, but doesn't know it. So he's like my
Okay.
spiritual mentor.
I
He
love
inspired
that.
me to write At the Island's Edge. His book inspired my book, and then he
Hmm.
endorsed it. We actually are published by the same publisher, so that was kind of a
Oh,
funny
nice.
coincidence. He very generously and kindly endorsed it. Then he became the mentor during the debut panel because this book has a lot of suspense elements in it, and which is
Yes.
why ITW recognized it. And he was my
Hmm.
mentor, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are the odds? And then our 2 books pubbed on the same day this year, and
So cool.
he's going to also be my mentor on my newest manuscript at a writers conference with Stephen James in November. So
Oh,
I just
wow.
sometimes in life, people are just meant to their
Yeah.
lives collide, and I'm very very grateful to him for even the impacts he didn't realize he was making on my
That is so
writing and on my
cool.
books.
Yeah. I love those stories like that. It's so
Yeah, it's
cool when
it's
things
been
do line up
magical,
like that.
very magical.
Yeah. Well, where can people follow you to stay up to date with this other manuscript that may be coming out?
Yeah, so I am on all the socials. If you look
Hmm.
up C.I Jerez with a J, you'll
Hmm.
find me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Blue Sky. I'm on all of them. I spend a
Yes.
lot of time on um, Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. So
Hmm.
it's easy to find me. My website has a lot of wonderful material to support reading the book. I've got recipes of
Mm.
Puerto Rican appetizers. I
Nice.
have a Spotify playlist. I have discussion questions, which are all actually in the book as well. There's
Mm.
a trailer for the book. And so my website is www.cijerezbooks.com. And
Okay.
there's tons of material there.
Yeah. I love when there's like extra stuff that accompany or that
Yeah.
that mirrors the book or whatever. That's so cool. Um
Thank you.
so I will put that link in the show notes for anyone who's interested, and thank you so much for talking with me about it.
Oh my gosh, Kate, I'm so excited to be on the show. I appreciate your time and spending time with me on the page. Thank you for following Lina and her journey. And I wish you so much
Yes.
continued success on the podcast.